Welcome to the Ali Maz Show, where we focus on human being and spiritual living with a deep inclination for the divine. Together, we delve into the seen and the unseen. We explore what it means to be well and whole from the inside out. Over the last 17 years, I've been focused on how movement, breath, and the power of the mind can liberate us from the template of our own conditioning and carve a path to live a truly authentic life. My hope is that my guests will inspire and expand you to continue to choose the life that is yours. Today's guest is Roopan Gill. Dr. Gill is the co-founder and executive director of Vitala Global Foundation. Recently named one of Canada's most powerful women, receiving the Women of Courage Award, Roopan was recognized for her work dedicated to improving abortion access and sexual reproductive health in challenging contexts. Roopan is an OBGYN, a humanitarian, and an innovator, as well as a Kundalini and breathwork and well-being aficionado. I'm excited to dive in with you today, Dr. Gill. Welcome to the podcast.
Like a merging of a moment in time.
It is. I think maybe it's important context to share. We met many, many years ago at a yoga and dinner series that I used to lead in Gastown in Vancouver, Canada, called Yoga Eat Repeat. And it felt like, I don't know, I so deeply believe in the who you are, and then to learn years later about the work that you're doing with the world. And I'm just so grateful to have the time and space to connect with you in this way.
Yeah, totally. And I actually think, well, I also want to add a little bit because I
Yeah,
feel like
please.
just even with you, I think also on the flip side, when I met you at that time and the fact that you are doing the yoga and the wellness work, but there was a deeper purpose behind it, right? Like all the work you're doing with young people, young teens, that intersectionality. Like I vividly even remember it to this day, like when we met in Gastown, right? And so I knew intuitively there would be a moment where we would circle back.
Yeah, and we're circling back in a really cool way. And so I want to dive in first. Maybe let's start with Vitala and how you decided to, you're on sort of one path in, the medical world and then branching out to, these big, big topics. We're talking about abortion, sexual, reproductive health in places where it's maybe not always welcomed. And so can you share a little bit about your nonprofit organization and how it came to be?
Yeah, no, definitely. So, as you mentioned, I'm an OBGYN and I also did subspecialty training in family planning. So, I'm an abortion provider as well. And that I think is important context because it really kind of shines a light in terms of what inspired me to start Vitala. I'm also a humanitarian aid worker, spent time working with Doctors Without Borders in some challenging contexts where I've seen women die of unsafe abortions. I've seen women die in childbirth. And so when you experience something like that, it changes it changes your life, it changes your world, and you can never unsee what you've seen. So from that, experience of being on the ground and seeing that type of some of these inequities and sort of atrocities that are happening, but also from my own personal experience working more at the like higher level policy level with World Health Organization, I also had my challenges there too, in working in these big bureaucracies that are doing great work, but are so far removed from the local context. And so Vitala really has been, it is like my dream job, I will say. I am so happy that I'm leading this tech not for profit, is what we say. And what we're doing is really working with local communities and co creating these digital solutions that are assisting and supporting women and girls, gender diverse people to make decisions and self manage their own sexual and reproductive health care. And a lot of our work is centered around the most stigmatized issues in sexual and reproductive health, which is abortion. We do contraception work and miscarriage work. And the reason why we're doing that is like, as I highlighted, I've seen people die of unsafe abortions. And it's one of the top, issues around maternal mortality, but it's one of the ones that's entirely preventable.
Mm.
And so it's kind of ridiculous that we see that, right? That people are dying of unsafe abortion. So we're so committed to this cause and particularly for the last mile, like folks that are the most underserved, the most marginalized. And we highlight challenging contexts and don't necessarily say low middle income countries because we are focused on humanitarian settings, but then we also recognize in high income countries, there's also challenging contexts. Case in point, the United States. So that's one of our countries that we're involved in. So our flagship product, I should say, is Aya Contigo. So it's our digital platform that is like a doula in your pocket, and it's your best friend that is there with you throughout the entire process of self-managing a medical abortion, and also providing guidance around contraception. Most of our work's in Latin America, but we've also now recently ventured into the United States.
Yeah, it's so incredible what you're doing and so important and so necessary. And I'm curious, you live in Canada, you're in Toronto. I know you travel the globe constantly, but to start to initiate a project like this and not say just, okay, let's look at, my own backyard, but let's go to Venezuela, let's go to Latin America, let's go to these places. And then also go, okay, we also need to go to the United States because, it's not so great over here either. So I'm curious, how did you sort of break into these places? How do you get them the word out about what you're doing? Like, it's one thing to start a nonprofit in your own country, but what does it look like abroad?
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a really good question. Well, it's challenging.
Yeah.
It has been challenging. I would say, just even the process of when I started Vitala, I think it's important to highlight this, that it was always a seed in my mind. And I was fortunate enough because I had seen a call out for a grant through Grand Challenges Canada that was essentially to say, it was essentially a project that I want to do in a challenging context. And it was essentially to do, what Vitala is all about. And the way that helped me, and I guess how I've been able to do the work I'm doing, is so much built and centered around trust. I would say that even getting into Venezuela and doing this work, I was fortunate enough through the relationships and the trust that I have built with different individuals, not just organizations, because it really does come down to the individual. Look at you and I. We are from different areas and walks of life. And definitely there was some sort of a connection and trust that was built in that moment we met that allowed us to reconnect. I would say in the same way that the work that I'm doing, like, so much about it is about the relationships, about the trust that we're building. So, for instance, I had already built a product, or it was part of my fellowship project that was essentially to co-create, using human-centered design principles, a digital abortion support tool for Canadian women. This was just this was part of my research project, and so I had done this, and it had actually already garnered some attention. So when I was working at World Health Organization and speaking to different partners and individuals, telling them about my work, about my passion, they kind of were like, wow, this is really cool. So they had seen validity in what I had done, but also I built this trust with them. And so when this call came out for this grant, I just said, okay, honestly, like, I should just put a proposal together. Who knows, right? And at that time, I didn't have an organization. I wasn't even incorporated. I literally incorporated myself like days before the grant went in. I didn't have any policy set up. So, and then when I approached the organization in Venezuela with the idea, honestly, like, to this day, I think about it. I'm like, I was just like me as a person with this idea, not even any like organization, but they trusted me. Like, there was something in that relationship that was built. And then from that day forward, like when I got the grant, then I had to do all the policies. Then my co-founder came on board, who's a very dear friend of mine. And then slowly, we were able to grow. And I think perhaps I had already, garnered like some reputation that people know, right? Like, working at WHO does bring privilege with it.
Sure.
I had gone to the field and worked in northern Nigeria before all of this. And so I've, shown my commitment to working in very challenging contexts and going where other people won't go. So I think I had credibility behind my passion about my word, that, okay, look, like, this is my life's work, like, this is something I've committed to since I was even before medical school. And I think people, they see that, and they're willing to come on board.
Oh,
And I'm grateful for that.
yeah, and I love what you're pointing to, because when when it comes to purpose, and this is something I believe, is everyone has a purpose in this lifetime, and we have to nurture the purpose and give it back to the world. And when you are so authentic in your purpose, which is who you are and what you are, it resonates, and like you said, it builds trust. And I think so much we live in such a sort of linear world where people would assume, oh, you must have, Rupan probably had, this whole plan and this tick tick tick, and then and it doesn't often happen that way. You had the desire, the purpose. And for me, purpose almost feels like you can't ignore it. It's like you can't even go to sleep at night because this thing needs to express itself from your being. And people can feel that and trust that and know that. But I think where we get a little bit mixed up when we're trying to follow our dream is like, oh, well, I don't know enough. And how am I going to do this? And to me, it's more about the what and the why than the how. I think the how sort of, like you said, it kind of comes together. Okay, I'm going to incorporate it. I'm going to do the things I need to do, but I'm going to apply for the grant and look where you are now. And I think if you didn't start, when you did, it might just still be this idea kind of rolling around in your brain. And I just love that. The trust that's built with you is because the authenticity is so resonant.
Yeah. I love that you're saying that, because it's like the trust, other people trusting, but trusting oneself, and so much of that is like just even trusting in the unknown, because there is a lot of fear too that you have to overcome to be able to say, okay, and really do these like thought exercises of like, what's the worst case scenario, right? You try and you fail. It's okay. You just get back up, right? And for me, I think as soon as, like exactly what you said, I didn't know like the hows. Like did I know as an, I trained to be an OBGYN. Would I have ever thought I would be in a place now that I'm like chief executive officer of a not-for-profit tech, where we're like talking about artificial intelligence and we're working on all these like, and then I'm running an organization with like, 50 staff. But it's all about exactly that. Like you just have that desire. And then I also feel like people, like I can't not discount the like none of this we can do alone. And there have been so many amazing, even before I started Vitala, that gave me the, like, just like all the mentors, and then moving forward, all the people who've like made this puzzle, like they're all pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm so curious as a woman of color, as a woman in tech, I can imagine that there were many challenges you needed to overcome. What were some of the things you heard as you were sort of building this dream? Because you're already a doctor. You're working for who? You're doing the thing. So I can imagine there would be people in your life that were like, okay, is that not enough? Like, oh, we're gonna do something completely unknown. So I'm just sort of curious that transition, because I have a lot of friends actually in my life who, they went to college for the thing, and now they're in the thing and wanting to pivot or shift or change. What did that moment sort of in time look like for you? And were people receptive, meaning your family, your friends, into this next dream that is so ambitious?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm super grateful for my family. I just want to say that. However, it's come with challenges. I am exactly like a woman of color. I'm first generation immigrant. I am Indo-Canadian. I'm Punjabi Sikh. So my parents, they came to Canada. They didn't have that much, so they had to work really hard, and they gave us all the opportunities. I never had to worry about that. I was educated. I got into medical school, did my residency in OBGYN. So of course, after I finished all of that, my parents would be like, "Okay, you have you have succeeded.
Yeah.
You have a and I had I have a clinical appointment here in Toronto. You have an opportunity to work in a hospital. You have the opportunity to make a lot of money. Um, but I chose to do something else. Now that came with a lot. I would say like of all the people in my life, that's been I know they're super proud. I know they are accepting of what I'm doing now, but I think it's taken time and it's been challenging for them to sort of wrap their mind around it. And I have a lot of compassion for that. Why? Because I recognize that they were immigrants to a country where they worked so hard, and then their daughter is deciding to make it for them. They see me making it harder for myself.
Right.
So that, push and pull with that, but also sort of being like the outsider and the outlier compared to even so many of my own colleagues.
Yeah.
And a lot of my colleagues have been very supportive. I will say that. Like, I'm really grateful for my colleagues here in Toronto, even where I trained when I was in Vancouver. They've created a supportive environment. However, it can be very challenging because you see that your life is so different from everybody else and the status quo. And sometimes you do doubt. That leads to a little bit of doubt, like,
Yeah.
oh man, like maybe I should be working more clinically and I'll make more money. Every time I have that doubt, I have a visceral reaction in my entire body that says no. It's like the intuition is so strong that the path that I'm on is the correct path, even though it can be very, very challenging. So, yeah, so that for sure, like the biggest, I think the greatest challenge has been my own internal. So I can't always blame it like, oh, it's my parents putting that pressure, them kind of not understanding, but it's also my own internal pressure of living in a world in which you do feel that pressure to do the schooling and do the thing, and then you get the job. Because I've definitely, I think people looking from the outside in may be like, wow, like she's, nomadic, and that's true. So I should say it's been in me since I was very young. I think I'm a little bit of a nomad, gypsy, free spirit. Like I need to explore the world. So that was already baseline within me. Now it's just perfect because I'm like leading an organization that's allowing me that. But I think it has been challenging for my parents to like wrap their mind around it, and just their measure and definition of success is a little bit different. Well, it's not different because it's just they have a certain focus, right, on what they think success is. So I've had to really do a lot of inner work um, to make sure I stay grounded, that I don't sway.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about the inner work, because I can imagine, and for anyone that's sort of taken a path that's a little off the path that maybe your family wanted, society wanted, your peers wanted, and I'm sure for you, it's like, oh yeah, you have this great job, you've made it, and you've ticked the boxes. Just stay in that lane. Don't make it more challenging for yourself. And what I'm hearing is like, no, you want, this is like you said, it's this visceral response, this visceral feeling to, this is the work I'm supposed to do in the world, needing to do in the world. But when this sort of inner dialogue comes in, and it comes in many different ways, right? The inner dialogue often is that sort of generational dialogue that we hear from our family, societal dialogue, and then our own little inner critic that comes in to doubt. So when the chit chat starts, where do you go? How do you manage it?
Ugh. I feel like, it's so, for me, I feel like I've always been a deeply spiritual person. So my religion is Sikhism. I wouldn't say, I mean, I really love my religion, but I'm just deeply spiritual. Even I've been a journal writer since I was very, very young. I started in 91. I know you're really big into journal writing too. So, and I have those old journals, and I remember, like, I look back and it's so funny. Like, I look back at some of them and I was like 8 or 9 years old. And I would say sometimes the excerpts are just like, I need to meditate more. And it's so funny to me to be like, wow, like that was in my ethos since I was that young. And so I think for me, life has been a spirit, like everything I do, and then like the breathing, every living act is like just a spiritual act. Every interaction, I feel like, is an opportunity for me to see an individual as a mirror to myself. What can I improve? And honestly, even Vitala, like I say this to my team so often, because being an entrepreneur, or like leading and like running your own thing, is like one of the, I feel like, the largest spiritual, like the biggest spiritual practices, sorry, because you are continually having to face a new shadow, a new trigger, a new, or even not, I shouldn't say old. They're like not new, sorry, old triggers, or
Yes.
right? Like all your stuff, and how you're interacting. So for me, I think like it's been a non-negotiable since I've been very young, in terms of like looking at my inner world Because if I myself cannot like address my inner world, how can I do the work outwardly? And activism and humanitarian work, I feel like now more than ever, we need more people doing their inner work so we can actually like just lead with a little bit more heart-centered leadership, more, conscious, compassionate leadership, activism, more peace. Like it's not, I don't want to just say it's about peace and love, because it is about peace and love, but it is dealing with our own, each individual's trauma. So for me, I have my yoga practice. I have like the Kundalini has been a huge lifesaver for me. Meditation, but also for me, my practice is Peloton. It's so spiritual for me, right? Movement and dance, writing, breath work. And I know
Yes.
the breath work that you also offer, like I honestly, I want everyone to know about that breath, that type of, the two inhales, and that
Mm-hmm.
that breath work has also been so healing and transformational for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing to it's so nice to hear this reflected back at me. And I love what you said, that this idea of entrepreneurialism is the greatest spiritual practice. And I do feel that way. And you're working in populations and with dynamics that are likely very triggering even for yourself as a woman, for your own well-being. And so you're at the helm of this sort of heart-centered leader. And I really believe this for myself as a teacher too, where I can only really take people as deep, my team, my students, as I've gone myself. And there's something about leadership that sort of tells us, like, if you want to change the world, you kind of have to go first, right? You're not waiting around. You're the one that's carving this path. And in order to do so, self-care doesn't even cover what we're talking about, but this idea of taking care of yourself, honing in on your spiritual practice, believing in something greater than yourself, however you want to define it, is not a luxury. It's a necessity. It's the most important part. And yes, there's a balance where you sometimes we lose it. You don't show up to the practice one day, you don't do your Peloton this day, you haven't journaled in a week, whatever it happens, we make those slips. But to me, it's the necessity. And I think for me as a young entrepreneur, when I started in my early 20s, I actually didn't see a lot of that modeled for me, specifically in women. I saw a lot of martyrship. I saw a lot of women more in their masculine energy of just getting shit done. And, there was no time for anything else. High stress, high functioning, but almost to a point where it was like, where's the humanness? Where's the heart? And what I see in you is that heart-centered leadership, that humanity in you, that transparency. And I'm curious if you had any role models in your industry or in your life that were actually showing a type of leader that you wanted to be.
Actually, I feel like it's the opposite. I think what it was is that I saw so much of what I don't want.
Yeah.
And, and I remember like even one of my friends who I was working with at WHO, her and I went on a surf trip and we were sitting, and this was before, I think it was like a year before I got the funding to start Vitala. And I remember sitting with her, we were like looking at the sunset. And I said to her, like, exactly this, like I just like one day want to be able to be part of an organization, maybe lead an organization where, and then I was like listing out the characteristics in terms of like the management style, having sort of this non-toxic culture, trying to make it, very heart-centered, professional, like, balancing the professionalism with empathy and vulnerability, but also having a space where people are honored for not just their productivity at work, but that they also are able to have the space to be themselves and do other things. So, for example, pre-pandemic, I already was like wanting to have a fully remote company that was, able to have, I'm a surfer. So if it's a good surf, you want to go out surfing, you go. But as long as you get your work done, you may be the a mother of like 2, 3 children. My co-founder is a mom of 2 kids. And so for her, starting with me and working at Vitala was perfect because it so fit in with her life. I have many other team members that are like this too. So I feel this wasn't necessarily modeled for me, honestly. Like, I don't feel it was modeled for me in terms of other leaders or even people who managed me. And, I just feel like everybody and that's what I hope that Vitala will be able to show, that it's not even just the impact we're making for women and girls, but also the type of organization we're creating and the culture we're creating.
Yeah, it's so inspiring to see. And I think that, you're at the forefront, and I'm seeing so many women in business right now that are running organizations that are doing it differently. And it's so innovative. And I think if we look back in the last, 50, 60 years, and, by way of living under a patriarchal society in the 9 to 5, I mean, it was created because men had wives that cooked and cleaned and raised the children, and their only job was to just show up and work and come home. And so when women really entered the workforce in a big way, so much of the responsibility of home and the emotional care was still a woman's job. And so, you were seeing all of these women sort of, like I said, acting like men, but still having all of these other responsibilities, not to mention hormonally how different we are as beings. Men are on that solar, 24-hour hormonal cycle. Women are on this lunar 28-day cycle. So we show up differently. What we need is different than men. And it's really, and I, have worked in tech, and I have worked for an organization run by men. And it was such a burnout gig for me because I don't operate and work that way. And it's so inspiring to see these women-led organizations, because I think we innately understand the fluidity and flow. And when I speak about feminine energy, I'm not speaking actually gender specific, but I'm sort of pointing to an energetic that exists, and the ability to sort of respond versus react, and the ability to say, okay, the waves are great today, or my child needs me today. I can still get my work done, but it's not at the cost of living life. And that's what I love about you being remote and really valuing travel and experience, and your humanness above just profit, and real change. So you're making change through the organization, but internally with your team of 50 people. Is that what you said?
Yes, yeah. So
Wow.
we have like a core team about 20, but then we also have many students and volunteers, and then we have our local staff on the ground. So yeah, it's like close to 50 staff. Yeah,
It's
it's insane.
it's incredible. Um, so let's talk a little. So I know that our hearts are sort of, we share our hearts in many different places, and specifically with the next generation. And you've created something called the Reproductive Justice Fellowship Program, which I'm really excited to be a part of. And I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about what the fellowship entails, and why the desire to work with Gen Z.
Yes. So the Rise in Reproductive Justice Fellowship, this is where our worlds have now recollided, which I'm super excited about. I'm so happy that I sent you an Instagram message and then you said yes, yes, yes. So basically, with the support of the philanthropy workshop and Pivotal Ventures, so this we got funding through Melinda Gates Pivotal Ventures to be able to create this fellowship program that empowers young Gen Z, not necessarily influencers, but they're like interested, they're content creators, and they're trying to figure out, and especially with Gen Zs that are like on TikTok and Instagram and all sorts of things, um, and creating content, and then also that are really interested, intrigued, wanting to do and desiring to do advocacy work, right? And then kind of thinking about the ways to merge those worlds. But it's not even just about advocacy work or advocacy around sexual and reproductive health and reproductive justice, but it's also what I've seen and I heard, and I'm sure like I would love to hear your perspective on this too, all about the need for their mental well-being and mental health and self-care. So that's also like they're thinking so intersectionally about these topics, right? And it's no longer like just about reproductive health. I feel like Gen Z see it as like very holistic, right? And so what we wanted to do, because Aya Contigo, it's all connected, right? So Aya Contigo, the digital platform, we're trying to really become the digital abortion companion that is intersecting both sexual and reproductive health and mental well-being. So kind of imagining your Headspace or Calm type app that is really targeting women and connecting with their, like you said, we are cyclical beings. right? So abortion is our topic area, but of course there's other areas that we hope at some time will be integrated as part of our digital solution. But what we want to do is really show that, like have a, the well-being piece connected into the solution. So that's the vision of the product of the future. And so part of this, what we see is that, and a lot of users already that use our app are young people. So we wanted to utilize the funding from Pivotal to really focus on empowering young Gen Z folks through this mentorship program that you are part of. And then we have a bunch of other amazing mentors that are going to be supporting the fellows through understanding, just basically about the basic content around reproductive rights, sexual and reproductive health and self-care, human-centered design. So all these things that Vitala brings to the forefront, but then also bringing on board our friends like you and others that are in the wellness space, that are in the influencer and like communications and marketing space, that are in the impact investing and femtech space. So this program has been curated in such a way that the fellows are going to get all of this content. It's like a recipe, so that in the end, and as they go through the program, they're going to be working on a project. So each fellow will use a medium of their choice and come up with a project. And we're hoping that the mentors will have an opportunity to then see every project. And then what we want to do is open up doors for each of these mentors to either work with a mentor they may have connected with, so they get a job opportunity. They may work with Vitala, so that's the whole intention. And Melinda Gates's Pivotal Ventures funding is really focused on that. It's all about power and influence, focusing on women and girls and gender diverse people. And our work is mostly for this is focused in the US. So yeah, we're really excited, and hopefully it's all connected to what we're doing, even with the product, getting the word out there, and movement building is a huge piece of what we do. So it's not just about the tech.
Yeah. I love the way it's just how you've diversified in so many different ways. And I love the inclusion of young people. And I work with Gen Z all the time, and they're such a brilliant generation. And I think where people sort of roll their eyes, they did that with millennials too. And now we do it with Gen Z, and they don't want to work and they don't want to, et cetera. And my experience has been so different. And I was just at a high school last week, 100 teenagers, and on a panel, and opening up the floor to young people to ask just really brilliant, poignant questions. And I mean, look at the world that's been delivered to them. Look at what's going on. I don't think a generation has felt this much pressure ever. And now we have a conversation of mental health. I mean, they have a vocabulary that certainly I didn't have at that age. I don't know if you did. I didn't know what anxiety was when I was 15 years old. I didn't have the language. I knew that I was experiencing things, but I didn't know how to call it. And I think what's so interesting about this generation is that they care more than ever. Is actually my and I talk to teens all over the world, but specifically in the U.S. and Canada. And to me, they're paying attention, and to have an opportunity to learn and be with mentors and be in this space. I just love that you're providing that for them. And I'm curious in the work that you do, especially when it comes to abortion care, if you've had pushback, if you have, pro-lifers coming at you, or, what that has looked like in this space.
It's interesting because I have received this question before, and to this date, I have not.
Great.
I think in some ways, and it's actually interesting to me because I am very front facing. I am the face of Vitala. I'm not shy about speaking about these issues. I post about it on my Instagram, on LinkedIn, but to date, I haven't. However, to be honest, I think it's important not to be naive either, right? Even though I know I haven't received much pushback, you just never know, right? So we take actually the whole safeguarding, cybersecurity, privacy very seriously, and that safeguarding is all the way from our user to the people who work in the organization, to myself, to our board. So we have to think about all of the layers of where. So as much as we're doing the amazing work and we're really happy, we also have to face the truths of like, if something bad did happen, right? And then have a contingency plan. So we definitely take all of that very seriously. It's just that I, to this date, haven't had direct pushback.
Yeah, that's
I
great.
will say though, um, I do find it's interesting, the maybe not as much on abortion, but I feel like, other topic areas that I use my voice on when it's related to humanitarian work or the intersection of reproductive rights and, what's happening as well in Gaza and Israel. That for me has been very challenging to navigate in terms of the voice, and it's all interconnected. Reproductive justice and like the work, the what stuff that's happening there. It's all of this is connected, and I found that actually been very challenging because I am a humanitarian aid worker and I do feel, and my co-founder as well. And so we really do feel this has been very challenging in terms of navigating the conversation and ensuring that we're not staying silent because, like, we can't, especially because we've chosen this as our life's work.
Yeah. Yeah, and striking that balance of using your voice, and obviously, I think this is what so many of us are going through, where we're consuming so much and we're consuming so much tragedy on a daily basis. We open our Instagram, we open the news, we're seeing so much tragedy. We're feeling helpless. We don't know what to do. We don't know what to post. And so, yeah, what does that balance look like for you when you want to share your voice, you want to support, you want to, not be naive to what's going on in the world, but at some point, the phone has to be put down. You have to deal with your own life and get your rest and balance your mental health. I think this is the question actually of our generation, because, if it's not Palestine and Israel, it's something else. It's the next humanitarian crisis. It's like rolling out every, month. There's something new.
Yeah. And that's one thing I like. I'm glad you brought that up because I think, the crisis that's happening right now, it's the crisis that we are all, it's like it's media, right? That's what we're all consuming, that, but like that's not the only crisis that's happening right now. We have so many other crises, and you're so right that it can be all consuming. You can actually, like, it can burn you out. And I think striking the balance is about, making sure, like what we said earlier, like really making sure that you do keep yourself strong, because you're not going to be useful at all, in terms of being able to use your voice effectively. But I do think that we are the generation that is witnessing and bearing witness to some of the worst, like all these atrocities that we all collectively have a responsibility. So you don't necessarily even have to be like a humanitarian aid worker. I feel like because we are consumers of social media, where we have access to so much information and like live information, that I feel like it is our responsibility. I do think, because the thing is, like, for example, even at Vitala, we do sometimes get people saying, oh, well, you should include HIV/AIDS, or you should include this area, or like, what about climate justice and like your work, and like, how is this, like, at some point you have to recognize that there's a lane that you're in, and really do your lane and do it well, but recognize not being ignorant to like the other areas that intersect, but finding the right partners, because other people are doing the work. Like, you don't have to do it all. I feel like just having that grace and knowing that, like, you don't have to have, yeah, you don't have to do it all. And you also, if you have the privilege, like, it's okay. Like, you can rest, you can do your practice, you can do yoga, you have freedom. We're recognizing that you do have freedom, and that you are
Yes.
privileged with that freedom. I think
Yes.
the self-awareness, which is that's what yoga teaches us,
Yeah.
right? The unity, union, yoga, right? And so I feel like that's so important.
Yeah, I love what you said, because I think we get so overwhelmed that we just don't take any action. And I love this idea of finding the corner of the world that you want to support. And like you said, you're in this lane. It's a needed lane, and everyone has a lane, and everyone can find a lane, and from the micro to the macro. And I had someone in my DMs that was maybe upset about something I had posted, and um and where were you on this day when you could have had a voice for this? And I was like, oh, I was at a high school with 100 teenagers doing this work. So I must have missed the news clipping of the day that I didn't speak on. And sometimes I feel really challenged by, is it enough of a voice? Is it not enough? But I think what gives me sort of solace is knowing that I am using my voice somewhere in the world at any given time. And sometimes what we can give back to the world too is our own well-being. Like you said, we're no good to anyone if we're burnt out. So sometimes the service that we can do is the times where you go, I need to take a break today. I need to be off of social media, because otherwise it truly is to what end? And then we can't do the work that is most needed when we're not in a place of feeling centered and connected, etc.
Yeah. And I also think, to your point there, like that's another thing of how I've been navigating it is part of it's like staying off, taking the breaks, but part of it is coming back to that conversation we were having on the work you do on your inner world, and like seeing your own shadows and your triggers. And um, one thing that I've had to navigate a lot is around, and I feel like now more than ever, I'm so much more grounded in my own truth that I'm okay with not some people unfollowing me. I'm okay with some people not liking what I have to say, or because sometimes that's not about me.
Oh, yeah.
It's so much about how that person, it's sort of a mirror, a reflection on what's being triggered in them. So coming to that piece, like kind of having that piece as well of like, in using our voices in the way that we're using it, and like how we're showing up in the world. Because I think being a very visible person like you are as well, and like on social media and things, comes with a lot of, it comes with a little bit of that pressure, because some people will not like you, or some people will not like what you have to say. But it's about letting that go, and
Mm.
saying, okay, for that X percentage that doesn't like what I have to say, like I'm not going to stop doing what I feel is right in my path, and my, and my values or my passion, right?
Yeah.
Or to
It's
stand
such
up for something you believe in.
Exactly. I think that was a lesson I learned, only in the last few years. Certainly, again, I've learned it many times. Sometimes we need to relearn, but this idea that you will disappoint others to go and follow your heart and your vision and your dream. And if you are pleasing every single person, I think it's impossible. But if it does seem that way, then you're probably disappointing yourself, right? And so often saying yes to you, you might have to say no to someone else. And I have to constantly remember that. I think it's sort of built into me. I think it's built into us as women. I see it actually more in Canadian women than I do in American women. Is the people pleasing is like it's almost cultural, I think, too. Oh, I'm so sorry, and oh, I don't want to rock the boat. And I think living in America has actually given me a little bit more, I don't know, thicker skin somehow. There's a little bit more, to a fault, me first mentality in America. But this idea that in order to walk my path, sometimes it is lonely, and I can imagine for you being at the helm of this organization and really blazing multiple trails that sometimes it can feel lonely. And I don't want to put those words into your mouth. I'm curious if it has felt lonely
Oh
for you.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah, as you were saying that, I was like, I felt it. um, yes, it has been. I think the as much as I'm so grateful for like all the support, I have like the most amazing team, the most amazing co-founder, but definitely like when you're at a sort of the founder visionary, level, um, and I'm curious because I want to ask you that question too. Like I know you're interviewing me, but I also have like two questions for you. But yeah, like I think it has been, and it has been a bit lonely. And I will say the most important factor um, is having a very supportive partner. I will say, like, the fact that I have the partner who I have, and that he's like, and I know Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she said the same about her partner. Like, some of the most successful, trailblazing women of, of history and of time have usually had if they had a partner, had somebody who was like right there by them, their side. And so I feel like uh, that piece and having someone who's like your cheerleader and is saying to you, you can do it, even if they fully don't understand everything that you're working on, but they're like, come on, you can do it. Um, I think that's a big important piece. And then I think for me, um, like having other, because I, like I said, I do all this work on myself. So I have, my coaches and I have my practice and I have this other community that's like my wellness community of, and also not just wellness community, but a community of friends that are also looking to live the kind of life I'm living, that is a bit nomadic, that are living in different places, that have, I have a van, so we van life. I have friends that do that too. So there's like that piece of belonging that I feel um, with other people that not necessarily entrepreneurs or founders themselves, but are like feeding other parts of my life that then help me feel less alone.
Mm, yeah. Yes. And I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, I certainly, when I started my businesses, I was young, 24, and, was like dating and had different boyfriends until I met my husband. So I do know what it is to sort of go the path without partnership, but definitely partnership at this juncture of my life has been amazing to have that steady person. I always remember my mom growing up, she would say, Oprah has Stedman, and his name is literally steady man. This is what you need. You need a steady man. And I certainly was not dating steady men up until I met my husband, who is very steady, very
Yeah.
grounded, and is incredibly supportive. So I really hear you on that. And then that piece of finding people who get it. It's like I can feel totally crazy when I talk about all the things I want to do and the dreams I have when I'm talking to someone who, is not maybe doing something similar. And I feel so seen and so connected when I speak to women like you, when I speak to people who are maybe living more of an alternative lifestyle. We've certainly been nomadic many times in the past, and I'm not sort of sharing publicly yet, but we've got lots of changes going on over here where it might look like our life gets a bit more nomadic soon. And when you have that community of people that just get it, there's so much solace in that. It just really feels like, oh, I'm not alone in this. And the having a spiritual life and tending to that spiritual life, I think for me is been the number one thing. All else falls away, right? People leave, people go, people die, things change, jobs get lost or quit. There's so much impermanence. It's all impermanent, but the connection to divine or source for me is the one constant. And I'm curious for you. I know it's sort of this ineffable, not it's so easy to put into words, but um, how would you sort of explain your connection to source or divine or to God?
Yeah, that's beautiful. Mm, I'm trying to think about the words I would describe it. Uh, Very similar to what you said. I actually feel for me that is the one unwavering thing. Um, the connection, like, okay, let me see. For me, it is like this deep inner knowing. Honestly, it's so hard for me to find the word, but really, it's like when I am in the flow of like my spiritual practice, and that's why I just like absolutely love, you know, thinking of things and doing my practices and like even my work, right? Like Vitala to me is like that's why I love doing it so much that it really does feel like it's part of my spiritual practice. But it is this sort of like deep inner knowing and a sense of just so much, just like a um the sense of this grounded peace, like I'm even trying to go back to my practice I did this morning and how it was like in the very dawn of the morning because I'm a little jet lagged and like, where it's absolutely silent and still. And how I feel like that's connection to source is really like this level of awareness. It's not even like, me as this, like this is all my ego, but it's like really when I can like let that all melt away and whatever is behind that, and I'm just so curious. Like, I think that's why I'm always seeking the truth. And I'm seeking it. It's like I will be a lifelong learner. So it's like the same why, you said I'm a Kundalini instructor. I don't really instruct like I do with my team, but I feel like it is this sort of, I'm like thirsty to go deeper, deeper, deeper. Like I know, like seeing that awareness and then what's behind that, and then what's behind that. And that's my connection, and it's like the same with the work. I feel like my activism is very spiritual, and like going deeper and like understanding that and understanding humanity and how we're all interconnected. So it's like my connection with nature. So I feel like it's like the seeking of truth. I think that's what it's about. It's about
I
really
love
seeking the
that.
truth.
Yeah. And I see that in all aspects of your life. And I think so many of us are, afraid to be uncomfortable. And the work that you do, I'm sure at times is uncomfortable and challenging. And the spiritual path can be uncomfortable and challenging. I think the wellness industry sort of sells us like, yeah, do this 2-minute meditation and then, or this quick little yoga hit practice. And certainly those things help. But once you start to skim the surface, I mean, we all started somewhere. For me, it was hot yoga, which I don't really do anymore, but it was the gateway into, okay, movement is allowing me to observe the mind, and the mind is going crazy. And the mind is saying a lot of things that I'm recognizing now. Oh, I'm my own worst enemy. How can I be with this? How can I observe the mind and start to shift and change how I'm speaking to myself? And then all of a sudden I'm feeling this emergence of presence and profound stillness and connection. Well, there must be something greater than myself, right? And like I said, it's sort of this ineffable thing, but what you're pointing to is truth. And what is truth? Well, it's that knowingness or the gnosis, right, of something so deep within yourself. And to me, like it's this weighted sort of presence and this thing that sort of weaves throughout everything that I do. But I see a lot in my students where you hit on something where it's challenging, and the truth sometimes is really uncomfortable and
Yes.
sticky, right? But the question of, well, what's underneath this? And what's underneath this? And we start to look at our programming. Well, what's underneath this sort of template I was given on how to be a woman or how to be human? Well, certainly, maybe there's another way to live. Maybe I can surf every day. Maybe there's another way to change the world. I can create an app. And, it's just so amazing. It's like you sort of have the pen in your hand and you're writing your life. And yes, there's many things that we can't control, but when we can't control, then we're in this place of surrender and trusting
Mm-hmm.
source, trusting the divine. Well, if it's not this, then it's something else. Show me another way. And I just think it's so beautiful to know that you in this work, as much as you're giving externally, that you're giving back to yourself and pulling and reining in and really protecting and utilizing your life force energy, right? And that's really what we're doing. And that is revolutionary. That in itself changes the world. That changes capitalism. That changes so many industries. And thank you for doing that. Thank you for the work that you do in the world. And like I said, not just externally, but in the early morning moments, in the breath, in the movement, all of that really, really has an impact.
Yeah, thank you so much. It is this like sort of lifelong, and I like that you said that because I think even when I'm talking about well-being and self-care, I just really, how the wellness industry kind of sells it. And like you mentioned, it is a practice. It's about these micro steps. I have these two really good girlfriends that have started their own um, organization as well, kind of on the wellness space, and they talk about this all the time. These like micro steps and these micro moments of growth happens. It's over time. Like even though I've done so much inner work, I still have my challenges. I still, I have to deal with fear and anger and so much of my shadow side. But what I think is so important is like for people to get to a point where they can just get more self-aware, right? And just like, okay, and you react, but then how do you repair? How do you learn from that? How do you move forward? And we're, something that I feel really proud about that we're trying to do. And I think this is what I was like reflecting just one point. I think I'm so like sometimes hungry or like thirsty for finding people like what in the loneliness piece, like finding people that are more like me or like not even more like me, but just with this value system. And I think a lot of it is why I go and do like a Kundalini yoga teacher training, why I go to like a breath facilitation course, or why I go and like do retreats, because I actually some of the most amazing people I have met and have stayed like as some of my really good friends are from those places and spaces. So they're not all necessarily in the same realm of work as me, and so I feel like, yeah, that's been it's so important to see that too. There's just so many ways of living,
Yeah.
you know?
Yes. I'm curious how you mentioned it before, but journaling, and I read this about you somewhere online, and this role that journaling plays, and I love that it was alive in you as a young person. It was for me too. Like my diary was like where I was expressing all these things that I couldn't necessarily say to my friends or my parents, and it was just this way of processing. I was and still am a very sensitive person. I feel a lot. I have a lot living inside of me. So journaling for me was this way of expression, and then slowly became this way, sort of like I was saying, literal pen to paper of these are my dreams. And I'm sure at some point you've written down so many variations of what Vitala could be in your work in the world and your nomadic lifestyle. So I'm curious what your practice of journaling looks like now.
So basically, I try, I don't really have a routine, though I have this challenge. Like, as much as I do all my practices, like, I have always had this challenge of being a true morning person. I think there's a reason why I'm an OBGYN, because we do have to stay up late at nights to deliver babies. So it's difficult to wake up. But it's like one of those things that I'm trying to be more consistent about. So a lot of my journaling happens. Um, it's not like I do it every day. A lot of it is free writing. It's not even that I'm like, thinking about certain prompts. If I'm working with a coach, even some of the workshops and like stuff that you put out there, like if I need that, then I will sign up for that and be like, okay, I need something to motivate me. But a lot of it is free writing. Um, and it will be I could go weeks without writing, or sometimes it could be like every day. It really depends on what's going on. Right now, December is a perfect moment. Like I am big on this. So like December is like usually my rest and digest reflection month. I spend a lot of time, just reflecting on the year that passed. And that like New Year's is a big thing for me. So I'm like always writing and reflecting about the year that passed. I've gone into this new writing practice where I write a letter to myself a year as if, so I have this letter now of December 31st, 2023 that I wrote last year, right? So I look forward to reading that because it's in the active tone. So it's like, okay, what was I able to accomplish that I had written back then at this end of the year? So I'll do that again, writing my letter to myself a year from now to see, Um, and I will say, putting pen to paper, so many things that I have, like, especially when I'm like in a crossroads of like just mumbled in my mind about Vitala, or like I'm mumbled in my mind about other ideas I have, because Vitala is one, but I have other creative ideas of like so much that I want to do in terms of intersection of wellness, all that I need to write. And it's in some ways a manifestation practice. So I was sharing this with one of my team members. When I look back, like reading some of my journal entries, and then I see where I am now, everything may not have happened exactly like, the way it is, but most of it has manifested in the way that I wanted. So that I think is really cool. Like even if your practice isn't like consistent, but I'm curious, like what is it for you? Like what is it for you? Because so many people do journaling in different ways.
Yeah, I love the letter. I love writing letters, and I do something similar where you're writing something, yeah, in present tense, so that as if it's already happened or it's happening. And that's a big sort of manifestation practice that I've kept for years. I love that you do that. And the reflecting time, it's winter here. I mean, kind of in LA, but it's really a time of reflection. This is the time to sort of look back and, like you said, rest, digest. We need to be living more in accordance with nature, and nature is telling us it's dark at 4:30 p.m. Come inside, time to go to sleep early. But it's certainly changed throughout the years. I was really impacted by the book The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, and her morning pages, which is just 3 pages, stream of consciousness every morning. And as I was writing the book, that practice, I needed to be more disciplined to get this book done. And instead of hopping into the draft of the manuscript, I would do those 3 pages of stream of consciousness, just like you said, to get all the stuff out of the head. It was sort of like a detox practice almost, just to clear the clutter. And then all of a sudden something would emerge, a truth would emerge. But just getting all the doubt and all the sort of cloudiness out of the head. So I when I want to get really disciplined, I go to morning pages. And for me, discipline, so I go in and out of discipline. Sometimes we're gearing up for a big dream right now, my husband and I, and so we're more committed to morning practice discipline. But there are certainly times where being less disciplined is the medicine. And so, like I said, we're cyclical beings. It can just be what it needs to be. But for me, it's always just this sort of stream of consciousness, a way to express. And then if it's more of a manifestation, it's writing, like you said, a letter in present tense. And the cool thing is, I was just home in Vancouver in the summer, and I keep all my journals, and I found this box of journals in my parents' garage. Wild. Like, me 7 years ago writing, I live in LA, I surf, I this, I that. And I'm like, I had no idea how I was going to get there, what circumstances were going to bring me here. And it was like, oh, okay, yeah, I just lived that day a couple days ago. And so journaling and being like, just thinking so far outside of the box and really pushing, like, how far could this go? I remember when I was a teenager thinking, one day I'm going to live in New York City. Like, I don't know how I was going to get there, and we lived there for 3 years. And now as we kind of go into this next venture, I know there's journals that pointed to this next thing. And so yeah, journaling is just one of those practices for me that it's like a creation of my life, truly, that exists within those pages. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's like not having any limiting beliefs, because that's one thing I'm working on as I'm writing. Because that's something sometimes I do get challenged with, because I do, even it's going to be funny to hear this, because I know I've accomplished a lot of things, but there's other things, in not about accomplishment, ways of living,
Yeah.
that I want to manifest into reality. So I feel like your own, like, journaling is such a nice practice to get past your own limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
Just like get it out there, like, and just put a pen on paper, and then that's it, right? And so I think, yeah, journaling, I love that it's very similar, having all these journals and then looking back at them, like, oh, I'm actually living that life.
Yeah, you are. You certainly are. When I was doing research for this podcast, like I said, I was like, Roopan is out here. She is doing her thing. She is, it's just incredible to see what you've accomplished, and doing it in such an authentic way. And as we sort of come to a close here, my last question for you is, what advice would you give to female entrepreneurs, specifically? You've paved the way in so many facets, and I'm just curious, what you would have told yourself as you began, however many years ago. If there's a piece of advice that you want to share.
I guess it comes back to what I feel like the theme of this conversation has been, and that's so much about the trust. And I would also say to give yourself grace. I think that's so important. Like, you're going to have stumbling blocks. You're not going to know everything. It's okay. Like, really, if you have this inkling within yourself, take some time to, like, even get still, or whatever way that helps you. Because I was listening to this really good podcast with Haberman, who says some people need to be still, others need movement. But whatever it is for you, so that you can hear that inner voice, trust it, trust that you take that micro step, one step at a time, and also give yourself grace, because sometimes your path will go one way and that's like meant to be that way, and then of course and come another way, but just really um trusting the process while giving yourself grace, I would say, would be my advice.
Yeah, thank you. I needed to hear that today. So I appreciate that so much. And where can people find you and find your work, the organization, the app?
Yes, thank you. So, for the listeners that are listening from the United States, so Aya Contigo is available. Aya, AYA, Contigo with you in Spanish. It's available on the Google and Apple Play stores. And then you can also follow us on Instagram at Vitala Global and also at Aya Contigo app. You can also follow me at Dr. Roopan Gill. I'm also on LinkedIn as well. So,
Beautiful.
yes.
Thank you for this conversation, Dr. Gill. It is an honor to hear from you, listen to you, and just hopefully more people to feel inspired and get involved in the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much.